There's a write-up in CBS Sports that highlights truthfully how dominant Kawhi Leonard is on defense. And the headline reads that Kawhi Leonard is so good at defense that he actually makes the Spurs as a whole worse on defense.
Yes.
And this is where all the advanced metric guys are going to start shouting that, told you those advanced metrics mean nothing.
Yeah.
Well, first let me show you the numbers, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean and exactly what CBS Sports means, because I think it's actually one of the best articles I've written in the NBA in the calendar year. Take a close look at that number in red. Defensive rating is your points per 100 possessions, how many points you're giving up as a whole. So 106.3 points as a whole, and Kawhi Leonard is on the court, right? And how is that possible? How could Manu Ginobili be 7 points better than Kawhi Leonard? And no one's ever said Manu Ginobili is a better defender than Kawhi Leonard. All right, we'll move forward. Next defensive rating number chart. Without Leonard, you want the number to be lower, and sub 102 is kind of your average, where you want to be. Statistically, anything lower than that is great. So without Leonard on the court, every single player is better. Namely, Tony Parker and Dwayne Dedmon, who's 78 points. But with Leonard, it all goes up. Francis, you're probably saying to yourself right now, all those Kawhi Leonard people who thought he was so good, he's terrible on defense. He's not even that good.
These stats are a little confusing, so you need to clarify just a little bit as to...
Basically, how we look at advanced metrics is through a thing called defensive and offensive rating. It's your team statistic in a way, and there's an individual portion of that. So a lot of it has to do with on-court and off-court plus-minus, which is, in terms of plus-minus, it's as simple as if you're on the court with the Spurs, right, and you're playing, and when you're on the court, your team is winning by 10 points, your on-court plus-minus is plus 10 because your team is winning, right? And if you're losing by 30, even if you scored X amount of points, it means you're negative 30 on court off. So usually it's a swayed number a little bit because, well, in a blowout, if the Spurs get blown out by the Warriors by 30 points, and even Kawhi Leonard has 45 points in that game, but he plays all 48 minutes, his on-court, off-court plus minus 30.
Yeah.
Right, because the team lost. Defensive rating has to do with that. Defensive rating, available since 1973, 1974. Is for players and teams, it is points allowed per 100 possessions. So 100 times that player touches the ball, how many points you're allowing per 100 possessions. Per 100 possessions, similar to per 36 minutes, is when you kind of adjust everybody to the same amount of playing time. So it gives you some variables, but a control. It gives you an idea of how good they are, especially when you're comparing guys who play 48 minutes compared to guys who play 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, how do you compare that? Well, you can round up to per 100 possessions, or you can round to per 36 minutes. So before we get too crazy with the stats, this breaks down a lot more simple than people want to at least attest to, right? I'm going to show you a couple screenshots as to why this is such an unbelievable thing. There's Jimmy Butler. When that play continues and we can't show you it, Jimmy Butler doesn't touch the ball. He actually doesn't move, right? Keep going through, because it's not just Jimmy Butler. It also happened to Aaron Gordon. They're running every set of these plays, and Otto Porter. They're running every set of these plays. Kawhi Leonard, that's Kawhi Leonard's man. They're leaving that man out of the equation altogether. Kawhi Leonard is so damn good at defense that they've decided that it is better off to play without Jimmy Butler even when he's on the court, without Aaron Gordon even when he's on the court, because why, when Kawhi Leonard is going to make them shoot 13 to 25% from the field?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, it's... The thing that you have to take into consideration is that there's going to be other things that come into fruition, right? It's not all going to be solely based on he's so good that they're infinitely a little bit worse when he's there. But like, there is his teammates' involvement and the way that they play when he's on the court is going to influence the way, because it's similar to any player when he goes on the court. The team doesn't play exactly the same as they would without Kawhi Leonard. They're going to play a little bit different. Maybe the defense, maybe those players get a little bit less concentrated on defense because they think Kawhi Leonard's so good, I can kind of step back. I don't need to focus as much on my defensive capabilities, which is going to play a part in it. But these numbers are so unusual, and the trend is so prominent that you cannot look past it without thinking, Jesus, like, it's because other teams are adjusting, not because the Spurs are doing anything a little different. As you mentioned, they're trying to find new ways to exploit this, because if Kawhi Leonard is so good, then the best way to get rid of him defensively is just to put out one of your best players and rely on the rest of your team shooting well, because it's going to give you a better chance than having Jimmy Butler wasted by his shots being contested nonstop.
And or frustrated.
Yes,
because what
exactly.
does great defense cause? Frustration.
Yeah.
And it could really spell disaster for teams if you don't want Jimmy Butler taking the last shot over Kawhi Leonard if you can have Dwayne Wade taking the last shot over, let's say, Patty Mills or Tony Parker or Manu Ginobili. So on top of everything else, for it, one of the things is I was talking with Andre Snellings, Dr. Professor DRZ, we have him on for NBA all the time, and one of the things that he stressed to me through an email earlier today was, and it's important, he says, the article is a clinic of evidence to support the notion that it's a given to me and a lot of NBA nerds, but that's hard to get across to the non-nerds, to the non-stat guys, right? Guards and wings cannot have as big of a defensive impact as bigs. It is impossible. And not in the subtle kind of way. The best wing defender is categorically way worse on defense than the best big defender.
Yeah.
So it shows that what his point being is one-on-one defense is not as important as team defense. So while the same thing falls back on Steph Curry and guys like Damian Lillard, they're not good one-on-one defenders. But how do they play as a unit all together? That's more important to the whole. So it just goes to, first of all, the facts of the matter are that when you have to, we talked about Jimmy Butler being a potential MVP candidate.
Yeah.
And the teams, as you mentioned, the biggest point of this is you have to game plan for not being able to use your best player.
Yeah, and I love...
just go straight at Pau Gasol, go straight at LaMarcus Aldridge, because they're not that good at defense. So you have to rely on your second, third, and fourth best players to beat the Spurs.
This, by the way, you really need to look into the depth of this article. It is hands down one of the best I think I've read this season because it explores something that many people would just take at face value. They think that because they're watching Kawhi Leonard play phenomenal defense and your mind is instinctively taken to those moments where he's blocked someone or he's shut someone down. The other players aren't picking it up. He's playing at an elite level and they're not at that level, which is partly to do with it. But it does come back to the fact that because he's so good, that other teams are trying to find a way to remove his capabilities. And it said here as well that teams this year are shooting 3.8% better than their average on 9.5 shots, which Leonard's contesting. So players are getting better at playing up against Kawhi Leonard because it's the only way you have to deal with it.
Because you have to watch that tape and go, how are we supposed to get over his ridiculously long arms and huge hands?
These are things that are actually interesting. I love how he calls it as well. Like you mentioned, Kawhi-solation.
Yeah.
So it's like, the best way to get to play against Kawhi Leonard, send him over there, have him mark, which is a footballing term. It's the same thing.
No, it's the same
thing.
Have him
guard.
I say mark
guard your best player or one of your best shooters. So you're basically sacrificing one of your best shooters, and that will work so well if you think about how the Spurs are maybe going to come up against the Golden State Warriors. Yeah. You would be willing to sacrifice a Steph Curry, a Klay Thompson to allow for other players to shoot.
What you have to do is you have to go to the basketball gods. I sacrificed Jimmy Butler to give us a chance to beat the Spurs today.
Which is insane.
Kawhi Leonard, the best, is he possibly the greatest lockdown wing defender of all time?
Is he the best, worst defender for your team?
Is he the best, worst defender?
Because he's the best defender, but is it worse for your team?
I can't get through my